أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Selamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we will continue with the third point of the 20th verse.
So, the first point was about getting to the names that we are taught of what all this universe is pointing to. And from the second point, as I can recall, we were discussing together about the fact of the mentioning of the cow and what sacrifice means. And if I can summarize a little bit from what I took for it, that all the things that we are in love with for the sake of the thing that themselves, for example, if I am in love with this house for the sake of the house, or if I'm, in love with my job for the sake of the job, or even if I'm in love with the prophet for the sake of the prophet, and I don't take that to the one who has created, and that love is futile. Basically, it doesn't go anywhere. So in that sacrifice of the cow, I have to learn to how I can direct that love from the thing that is created to the source of the creation. So I have to sacrifice that thing that I only think is for that thing, that self, for the object that's itself. Then that is what the sacrifice has to be.
Third point. And yet, after all this, your hearts hardened and became like rocks, or even harder. For, behold, there are rocks from which streams gush forth, and behold, there are some from which, when they are cleft, water issues. And there are some that fall down for awe of God, and God is not unmindful of what you do. While reading the above verse, the whisperer said, "What meaning is there in discussing and explaining, as though they were the most important and significant of matters, certain natural states of rocks which are commonplace and everyone knows about? How is it fitting, and what need is there?" In the face of this suggestion, the following point was imparted to me from the effulgence of the Quran. Yes, it is fitting, and there is need for it. And it is so fitting, and there is a meaning so significant, and truth so enormous and necessary, that only through the Quran's miraculous conciseness and guiding grace has it been simplified to a degree and summarized. Yes, conciseness, one foundation of the Quran's miraculousness, and guiding grace and fitting instruction, which are one light of its guidance, require that in the face of ordinary people who form the majority of those whom the Quran addresses, universal truths and profound and general principles are shown in familiar and particular forms, and that, due to their simple minds, only the tips of vast truths are shown, and in a simple form, and moreover, that the divine disposals, which are wondrous and extraordinary beneath the veil of the commonplace and under the earth, are shown briefly. Thus, it is due to this mystery that the All-Wise Quran says the following with the above verse. O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what has happened to you that your hearts have become harder and more lifeless than stone? For do you not see that those extremely hard, lifeless, huge rocks formed in vast strata under the earth are so obedient and subjugated before the divine commands, and so soft and tractable under the dominical works, that to whatever degree the divine disposals occur without resistance in the formation of trees in the air, orderly water channels and veins, like the circulation of blood in veins, occur with the same ease and order and with perfect wisdom in those hard, death rocks under the earth. And like the way the branches of trees and plants spread in the air with ease, encountering no obstacles, the delicate veins of roots spread with the same ease in the rocks under the earth. The Quran indicates this and teaches an extensive truth with the verse, and thus by allusion says the following to the hard-hearted. O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what sort of heart do you bear within your weakness and impotence, so that with its hardness it resists the command of such a one? Whereas how perfectly and obediently the huge strata of hard rocks carry out their delicate duties in the darkness before his commands. They display no disobedience. Indeed, those rocks act as treasurers for the water of life and other means of life of all the living creatures above the earth, and are the means for their division and distribution. They do this with such wisdom and justice that they are soft like wax or air in the hand of power of the all-wise one of glory. Offering no resistance, they prostrate before his mighty power. For just like well-ordered creatures and wise and gracious divine disposals occur on top of the earth, which we observe, the same occur beneath it. Indeed, divine wisdom and favor are manifest there in a more wondrous and strange way in regard to wisdom and order. See how like wax, those hard, unfeeling mighty rocks display a softness towards the creational commands, and how they offer no resistance or hardness to the delicate waters, the fine roots, and silken veins, which are divine officials. As though like a lover, the rock's heart melts at the touch of those delicate, beautiful things, and becomes earth in their path. And behold, there are some that fall down for awe of God. The Quran shows the tip of a vast truth, which is like this. Like in the event of Moses asking for the vision of God, and the famous mountain crumbling at the divine manifestation, and the rocks being scattered, through the manifestations of divine glory in the form of earthquakes and the mountains shaking, most of which are like great monoliths formed of solidified liquid, and certain other geological occurrences. Through such awesome manifestations of glory, the rocks fall from the high summits of the mountains and are broken up. Some of these crumble and, being transformed into earth, become the source of plants. Others remain as rocks, and rolling down to the valleys and plains are scattered. They serve many purposes in the works of the earth's inhabitants, by being utilized in their houses, for example, and prostrating in submission before divine wisdom and power for certain hidden instances of wisdom and benefits. They take on the form of being at the command of the principles of divine wisdom. The evidence that they're leaving their high places out of awe, choosing lower places in humble fashion, and being the means of those significant benefits, and that they are neither futile nor acting of their own accord, nor are objects of chance, but that within the disorder, through the wise disposals of one all-wise and all-powerful, they are within a wise order not apparent to the superficial eye. The evidence for this are the purposes and benefits attached to the rocks, and the perfect order and fine art of the shirts adorned and embossed with the jewels of fruits and flowers, with which the body of the mountains down which they roll are clothed. These testify in a decisive fashion which cannot be doubted.
The third point. And yet, after all these, your hearts hardened and become like rocks. And yet, after all these is, anyway, I'm not arguing English. After all these, your hearts hardened and become like rocks, or even harder. For behold, there are rocks from which streams gush forth. And behold, there are some from which, when they are cleft, water issues. And there are some that fall down for awe of God, and God is not unmindful of what you do. And God is not unmindful of what you do. What is the Arabic version of this being unmindful? Ghafil? Okay. This is a very interesting way to finish it. And God is not unmindful of what you do. So this is from Quran 274. While reading the above verse, the whisperer said, what meaning is there in discussing and explaining as though they were the most important and significant of matters? Certain natural states of rocks which are commonplace and everyone knows about. How is it fitting and what need is there? So let's be sure that we are we all are on the same page with the question. So what should we understand from the question, or what do you understand from the question? Any attempt?
So it sounds like if I go with a literal reading, in here it is saying that what's wrong with you that your hearts become harder than rocks, and then starts talking about properties of rocks. And the question is, what's the point of telling me about properties of rocks? Okay, the first part you said that your heart is now harder than rocks. Okay, so let's say you use it as a like
Metaphor.
literature, some sort of nice way of speaking. You said that your hearts are too hard. But then, okay, why are you keep giving me details about those stones? So in this sense, I guess, unless we come up with a good reason for Quran explaining or giving me these details, otherwise it doesn't really make sense to learn these sort of things. Or we wouldn't expect it in the scripture.
And like when I first read this part, the question, it said, what is meaning is there in discussing and explaining as though they were the most important and significant things? I didn't understand first, like why he asking, where did he come up with that in Quran, this stuff is being represented as significant or most important. But now when I read this verse again, the way it's presented, the way it's told, the utter, it really sounds like what is being said is so important. Let me read it again. After all these, your hearts hardened and become like rocks, or even harder. For behold, there are rocks from which streams gush forth. So the way it's being articulated, it's like, behold, there are rocks from which streams gush forth. As if he's telling something really important. Right? And as the whisperer said, everybody knows that there are rocks from which streams gush forth. Or there are some from which, when they are cleft, water issues, and there are some that fall down. These are like saying, behold, you have two eyes. I know I have two eyes. Like, why should I behold for that? There is one comment, and I guess Suhail wants to make a comment. Fariha says, first thing that I ask is, what do I make out of creation around me? In this case, rocks in particular. What do I make out of knowing about the rocks? I guess this is the question. And Suhail, I see you raising your hand. Please go ahead if you want to say something.
It's interesting, the whisper, which is kind of a sort of, I think is referring to the satanic sort of whispering, in that what meaning is there in discussing and explaining as though they were most important and significant of matters? It's interesting because, people will study rocks as if they are very interesting and important because they may tell you about the, life and story of the earth, of the universe. They may explain things in the environment from 1 billion years ago, 1 million years ago. But when it comes to the human being, the human being, I think, thinks that he's above all of that. Like, he's not, related to whatever is taking place in the universe. He cannot be compared to rocks. I'm a human being. I'm privileged above a rock. Whereas the Quran is, in a way, kind of drawing a comparison in between who man is and what rocks are. And what is their what is the essential purpose of being, of existing, for anything in existence, including the rock? And as as he goes on to explain later, it's essentially, willful submission to its maker, to its creator. I guess willfully submits its existence to him because it's him who gives it to the rock. And it's interesting because people who may criticize this verse, or in general verses in general that appear to deal with sort of mundane matters, it's because that I guess they think the human being is above that which is commonplace. It's incomparable. But really, when you understand that the universe and man are equivalent in their existence, and what they must be doing here, essentially what is their given purpose, then really it makes perfect sense.
Asim, go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I may add, that's a very good point, Suhail. Thank you. Like also the heart of a man, from a scripture perspective, is something very significant, I would say, because that's what the heart is, what makes everybody human. And the way at least the verse is saying, the hearts hardened and became like rocks. And then the connection is made, even in creation, you see rocks that are so hard, even they are, following the will and of their creator, right? So even they can be broken up and stream can go through them. So even though the heart is becomes so solid and hard, there's no way that it can escape what the absolute will is, or they also follow a particular order in their creation or in their existence. So, and then it's very interesting, and before like the concluding word sentences that says, some fall down from the awe of God, and that awe of God, and then just being, the rocks actually are being awed by this, this feeling or the sense of that there is a creator that they are, are dependent on or contingent on, and then, who they are supposed to follow. So they fall down in awe of God. And then again, that ties into the heart of man. How is it that the heart of man can stay like this when you look at the other rocks that are so hard, and then they are doing what their purpose and existence is? And then the last phrase is amazing, and then final conclusion is, and God is not unmindful of what you do. What whoever the conscious being who is reading this, it just, after talking about the heart and the becoming hard and the rocks, and the final phrase, and God is not unmindful of what you do. I thought that was pretty very interesting, that to bring the human sense back into that there is a source behind all this, that no matter how hard you deny it, don't accept it, are not using, maybe the heart's also referring to your human senses, your rationality, your feelings, all your qualities as a human being when you're studying and observing the universe. There's no way you can escape that. Just see what the universe is telling you, as Suhail was also alluding to. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Another comment?
In here, I guess this, especially in the paragraph that follows, there are two major emphases that I see. One is the conciseness of Quran, so he is underlining this part of it. And then we need to maybe open this up, what he means, why Quran needs to be concise. Because according to the author, conciseness of Quran is part of miraculousness of Quran. And he speaks as if it is also necessary for Quran, or the speech of God needs to be as such. So this part, I guess, we need to underline. And the other part that he also mentions in the same paragraph is there are some things which appear to us natural. So Quran attracts our attention to those things not being natural. Within them are a lot of things that are manifestation of God's names. So you should be paying attention to them. So I guess these are what I'm seeing as the two big messages in the following paragraph, maybe which we can open it up further.
Conciseness and defying the ordinal.
Yeah, so in layman's terms, natural things, they are not natural.
There's no such thing as ordinary.
The scientific term.
So this is what I was thinking when Asim was speaking. There's no such thing as ordinary, or I guess we are somehow the questioner, the whisperer as well, somehow disturbed or not happy with the fact that the Quran is so simple with its language or the examples and so on. They're so simple. Like I was thinking, asking myself, is this really the case? Like, are we or am I really get bored, or let's say that I'm not happy with such a simplicity? I was just, reviewing what I like or what people like and so on. Especially when it comes to literature or art or the things that supposedly at least reflects the creativity. We are, like in general at least, so inclined to follow things which are too extraordinary. Like a good movie, for instance, has to have some strange components that will disturb you, right? It can't be a simple story. It has to have some parts that will question some norms, that will, somehow disturb you. Otherwise, we're not happy. It has to be marginal. Things has to be complicated, like sophisticated, right? The words that we use. It has to be heavy, let's say. That's what we like. That's what we think that something is intellectually valuable. It has to be so heavy. Not only with the content, but also with the language that it's presented.
And we say this because if it is so, then it becomes valuable.
Yeah.
Right? And if the speech is speech of God, so it must be something valuable. So, like going back to your example, the director of this movie is not an ordinary person, so his speech shouldn't be ordinary.
Yes. And with this ordinary, right, we say it shouldn't be ordinary, and with this we imply that there are some ordinary things which are like simple. They don't even, they are not even worth to discuss. We take them as granted, we take them as, simple. Who cares about the rocks? Right? It has to be someone cheating another one, at the same time robbing the bank and then cheating someone else and then killing two people, and it has to be some complicated relationship. Otherwise we are not satisfied.
This reminded me that there are, like in Quran, like they categorize the verses as muhkam ayat versus mutashabih ayat, right? And I think in the
can you translate that, please? What that means?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't really know the English terms, like what it means, like in English.
If anybody has any idea, can help. Otherwise, let Osman finish, and then we can clarify.
I cannot really speak to the term in terms of the English terms, but I was going to explain what they refer to. So in the traditional sense, like muhkem ayat, like refer to, for example, like in the example, the ayat talks about the rocks, because everybody sees what is being talked about, and that's why it's something substantiated, right? It is something that you can through your experience you can say that, yeah, that's as such. And the muhkem ayat refers to the mutashabi ayat. They refer to the ayats that like talk about let's say the unseen, that refers to the unseen. Let's say like describes like certain attributes of the creator that you can never really fully comprehend. That is the understanding that we are used to. But like I remember like a few years ago, Dr. Ali was discussing what mutashabih is and what muhkem ayah is, and he was taking like completely the opposite way. And the reason for this is that like he was saying that actually mutashabih ayats are the ones that we are studying today, because it refers to something that is experiential and that you observe in the creation. So there must be a reason for the creator to tell you, like, or repeat to you what you already observe, and that you can actually find out yourself through the experiential observations, as opposed to the muhkem ayats, which refers to the, again, like the unseen. They are muhkem because anything that you say about the unseen is pure speculation. So no one has been there, no one like has experienced it, what it means. So whatever you can say is going to be speculation. That's why it must be muhkem, because it must be based on your own training under the like teaching of the Quran. It must be your conclusions about the, let's say, paradise or angels or attributes of the Creator. So after this introduction, I think if this ayah is, if it is taken in the second way, which is mutashabi, like as the Dr. Ali refers to, so then the question is, why does my Creator tell me something that I already observe? Like I don't need like the Creator of the universe to tell me that the rocks are hearts and the waters come out of the rocks, because if you drive by like 76, you are gonna see like on the left-hand side like water coming out of the rocks, right? So what is the point of like repeating this in the Quran to me, and what's the purpose of it? And what does that mean in the main message of the Quran? I guess like when you ask that question, then there needs to be some sort of explanation, and I think that's what like Nursi is doing, like why it is mentioned the way it is mentioned.
Asim says significant / fundamental matter, significant fundamental matter, and allegorical that refers to the fundamentals. I guess he's giving a definition for muhkem and mutashabih. If you like to expand it, Asim, you can go ahead. But before that, Suhail, he wants to say something, and then Conley. Go ahead, please, Suhail.
I wanted to address Yusuf's question or statement about, Nursi says the miraculous conciseness of the Quran, and you were talking about simplicity. It's interesting because we're always searching for the most parsimonious, simple explanation of the world. At least I am. And it's really befitting that the explanation of that world should be precise and concise, because it means that anyone and everyone can understand it. It's not something that's, privileged. You have to be intellectually privileged to understand the existence of the world, or what it means, or what does man's existence mean, and what's he doing here. And it doesn't really say it means anyone can fundamentally grasp those concepts. They don't have to be some sort of, they don't have to be Albert Einstein to figure it out. And I think that's sort of the Quran's miraculousness, is that it can address such, important matters in such simple terms. I guess that's the nature of absolute speech, that it must be concise. Otherwise, it wouldn't be absolute. And it really kind of speaks to not simplicity as that man is simple, but, really the simplicity of what the answers are. They're not something that's so difficult to grasp that I can't do them, or that I can't understand them. But really, it shows you how simple life can be if you see it within the Quranic worldview. And the language accompanies that, because it gives it is really describing something that is not, as you said, overly complex, complicated, full of, so many bizarre things. No, it's, the existence of the world is completely understandable by everyone.
Conley wants to say something. Before that, just give me a second, Conley. There's a comment from Mohammed Saeed. He says, the ending of the verse is interesting, that it is connecting the emptiness of the movements of the rocks to man's unmindfulness. Connecting the emptiness of the movements of the rocks to man's unmindfulness. The man's unmindfulness of his own position in the existence. If I am alone among these beings, then everything around me is alone by themselves. Mohammed Said, you may also want to expand this a little bit, but before, let's hear what Conley says.
Well, I was just thinking as Suhail was talking about the resonance. If you are an absolute master of something and you can condense it down into a few words, what happens, what I've discovered is that there are multiple levels of our awareness, and it seems like the less access you have, like in dreams and lower states of consciousness, the more detail you can handle. Where when you're fully awake and fully conscious, that's actually the least amount of detail that you can handle. I don't know why, but it seems like you can understand a lot more underneath than you can on top. And I think what happens with very simple, elegant statements is that it gives you a chance to, for the top level to understand on one level, and everything underneath to begin to resonate. As the thought bounces around, it's opening up all these pathways underneath that you're not even aware of, but you feel the resonance of those thoughts as they bounce. And the other thing is, why, state the obvious, I've heard mentioned before.
I'm sorry for interruption. Sorry. There might be something with your mic, because there's a constant tapping sound. Probably it's like, I don't know, touching something when you're talking, or...
Oh, is it still going?
For instance, now it's not there, but when you are talking, there's a tapping sound.
Is it there now?
No.
And this, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right. No, I'll keep very still. That's the computer. Hold on one second. Okay, there should be no problem. So yeah, as far as like stating the obvious, there's also a matter of reminding. Like if, say I have, if I had one leg and someone said, you only have one leg, I already know I have one leg, but now that you've told me again, you've brought attention to it, you've refocused my attention on the fact that I only have one leg, and it causes a response. It causes a, it causes a negative reaction. Well, that can happen both ways. And, it should never be played cheap. The idea of repetition, of refocusing, of reminding principles can sort of, there can be an additive effect over time when you're focusing on an idea or a truth. So I just wanted to share that.
Jazakallah khair. So Asim and Mohammed, would you like to elaborate your comments? Mohammed, you can go first if you'd like. You haven't spoken yet.
Sure. The ending of the verse is when it says, let me open it up here real quick. And when it says, God is not unmindful of what you do, the first thing I ask is someone mindful of me? And this question, I think, is the purpose of all the part of the verse beforehand. So it's definitely when I ask this question to myself, is someone mindful of me? Then all the qualities of me, I ask the question to check and see if there is any evidence for me to really confirm that there is someone mindful of me, and then I think it becomes possible for me to really take all the motions into consideration with the mindset that someone is mindful of everything. I'm not sure if I made it clear, but that mindful part is the purpose of this verse.
So I guess, like what I understand from what you said, at least one part of it, because you said several things, but when we read the verses under the light that there is someone who's mindful of us, and there's someone who's mindful of everything, including rocks, then the meaning of the verse will change, and the way we interpret things will change. This is what I understood from what you said, partially. Asim, would you like to say something about your comments?
So yeah, that was basically when Osman was saying, that's what I understood about the, these significant matters that this first paragraph is referring to. So the verse that we are studying here is being questioned, like it looks very ordinary, as you were saying, but then it is really going to be highlighting as we go along. And we already see that now that we are discussing this, and Conley pointed it out that, it brings your focus and attention back, although it may seem obvious, I know that, but why is somebody telling me that, to look at the rocks and observe that and see how they are behaving. So, yeah, so the point I understood was, yes, everything that is that may seem simple, and but it is always acting as allegorical, that it is referring to something, and what it's referring to is always something very significant and fundamental. So that's what I took away from what Osman was saying.
Yeah, actually, that was exactly the point that I was trying to make. So, studying these verses should, the way that I understood how Nursi explained in the following paragraph, it should result with a certainty in God's action every single of beings in the universe, including the rocks themselves.
Let's continue with the paragraph saying, yes, it is fitting and there is need for it. Yusuf, would you like to take us through the paragraph?
I'll just read it slowly. Yes, it is fitting and there is need for it. And it is so fitting and there is a meaning so significant and truth so enormous and necessary that only through the Quran's miraculous conciseness and guiding grace has it been simplified to a degree and summarized. Now he talks about conciseness. Yes, conciseness, one foundation of the Quran's miraculousness and guiding grace and fitting instruction, which are one light of its guidance, require that in the face of ordinary people who form the majority of those whom the Quran addresses, universal truths and profound and general principles are shown in familiar and particular forms, and that, due to their simple minds, only the tips of vast truth are shown, and in a simple form. So this was the part about conciseness. So while reading that, I'd like to ask the question, just to open it up a little bit further. Why is it a necessity for Quran to speak in this way? And although the author is clearly speaking it up, so Quran must be addressing the majority of the people, which are simply minded, in a way that they can understand. So what I understand from this they can understand part is level of abstraction is not that much advanced for simple-minded people. So you need to speak in a way that they can make sense of it.
And they can make sense of universal truths and profound and general principles.
Yeah.
So you will make known universal truths and profound and general principles even to the simplest mind.
That was your comment, or it was a question?
The question was why it has to be that way. Why it is necessary. That was the question, right?
Yes, was the question.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, let's say the concept of the creator is an abstract concept in the first place. And how are you going to convey this message to a person that is not very much well-versed in abstraction? Maybe the person is thinking in terms of, I don't know, number. So when it comes to counting, it's about finger counting, let's say, at most. Because even the concept of zero is an abstract concept, for instance, and it took ages for people to discover zero. Such abstract concepts. So for a simple-minded person, how would you explain it?
Asim says something as a means of answering. He says if things were complex, specialization would be required, and most people are not specialized. If things were complex, people must have been the special. Abdurrahman, go ahead, please, then we will leave the mic to Suhail.
I have a question. So, I'm just trying to understand what would a complex verse be? Like, the idea is these, I don't know, I'm guessing God is trying to show that the rocks are obedient slaves, or they're worshiping God, they're glorifying God. And as far as I can tell, this is the exact way to say that the rocks are glorifying God. Like, what would be a complex way of saying this? Like, how is this a simple form? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I'm not sure if being concise necessarily means it's simple.
Yeah.
So what I understand is like Quran is an eternal speech to all mankind and at every level of mankind. And some may be deep thinkers, some may not be, some like may just take everything superficial. So it should speak in a way that will address all levels of mankind. And that's where the conciseness come into play, that like it talks about in a such a depth, but at the same time it's just in a such a that's where the simplicity comes. Like, doesn't mean that the verse is simple. It talks about the existence itself in a such a like that, but at the same time in a such a clear, simple language that everyone can relate to the verse. So it will speak to the like someone who is not, let's say, uneducated about anything in life, but at the same time, the very same verse will speak to the most deep thinker. So it will have like different layers, many different layers of meanings that will address all the individuals all at the same time. That is what I understand from being like Quran's language being concise. I don't know if concise necessarily means like refers to complexity or being complex or anything like that.
I guess the concise itself does not, but the way author puts, the way author puts, he says they are concise because they are referred to simple-minded people. So I guess the connection between conciseness and simplicity comes from there too.
Yeah, I mean, by saying minimum amount of words explaining a lot of concepts. So this is, I guess, the ijaz meaning short expression, a lot of meanings. But yeah, it needs to be addressing a lot of people. So I guess in this context, for example, for this verse over here, if we were to take this as an example, up to this verse, those son of Israel were reminded of a lot of mercy bounties that the Creator gave them. And now in this verse saying that, but despite all these, your hearts are so hardened. So now what's the mindset in here? So you have seen a lot of things, and still you think like, well, okay, I mean, it was not a big deal. And if I live oblivious to this, as if none of them has happened, I can just turn the corner without any issue. I mean, creation is so huge, God is not going to mess up with me, what's the point? Just as if I can be forgotten easily in this environment. I forgot God, God also can forget me. This sort of a mindset is there. And in this verse, the Creator is now saying that I do not even forget rocks. You think that rocks are, because your hearts are so much hardened, and you think that rocks happen by themselves, as if God has forgotten rocks. Rocks act by themselves. And then because of this mindset of you, you also think like you are going to be forgotten and ignored. Now the Creator says, I am not forgetting the rocks. Therefore, I'm not forgetting you either. So this sort of it's a very general concept that is being explained in here, but it is being spoken in the metaphor of rocks. This might have been spoken in a different way, saying that the Creator is the Creator which spins the electrons around and then starts talking about quantum physics, I mean, this sort of things. But no, Quran is just talking about rocks, and rocks are accessible to everybody. So in this sense, it is simple and easy, and it doesn't talk about, even maybe not giving examples from, if we were to say that to a philosopher, explain us the God being aware of everything, maybe it will start from premises saying that first this and this are established, then start building with ands and ors and XORs, whatever, and therefore God is, this sort of a very super abstraction level of explanation would also be possible. But Quran is just using simple rocks. So this is what I'm understanding as being short, concise, and simple. because it's available for anyone which has eyes or which has a sense of touch, saying that rocks are very hard. I mean, apparently they don't feel anything. So this sort of a very superficial understanding of the concept of rock is enough to understand this verse.
We will visit the simplicity and conciseness again, but before that, Suhail is waiting to be heard. Please go ahead, Suhail.
Yeah, to kind of tie in what everybody said. One thing, what I liken it to is that, for example, the shortest path between any 2 points is a straight line, and the Quran and its conciseness, as kind of Yusuf was alluding to, it doesn't take you into infinitely different paths to get there. In that, the verse itself is it's concise in that it's to the point. It takes you from point A to point B quickly, immediately. For example, it begins with the hearts, hardened rocks, or harder, and then talks about the way in which rocks submit, gush forth, cleft, and fall down for awe of God. And the end point, the point B is, and God is not unmindful of what you do. So it takes you from point A, hearts, to, and God is not unmindful of what you do, in a very quick manner. Now, some people, as Osman was saying, you may drive from point A to point B, and you may try to speed to get there. So you're just interested in getting to the conclusion, and not sort of experiencing what that path or journey is. And that to me is kind of, as Nosh was saying, the miraculousness is in that it takes you immediately from point A to point B, from what is the matter at hand to immediately what is its significance. It doesn't concern you with unnecessary details about how things are, because unnecessary details are not significant for what they existentially mean. So that's how I took it in one way. And in another way, what Conley said, it's, if the Quran is absolute speech, for the speaker to not speak in the most concise manner is, in a sense, as Conley said, it's as if the speaker has not mastered the subject. Because if he mastered the subject, or if he was the master of the subject, I should say, then he has either one of two options: either to speak in the clearest and most direct of manners, or to speak in the most, sort of roundabout, confusing of ways. But if he is a master, by necessity, he's going to be speaking. If he's an absolute speaker, by necessity, he'll speak in the most concise of manners, because any one word the way in which absolute would speak is that in even one word could enormous meaning be encapsulated. So there's no need for 5 words to explain what one word could explain, or what one concept could explain. Otherwise, he would not be an absolute speaker then. And the last thing I'd say, one's lack of understanding of a concept is how, as Conley said, how sort of, roundabout or in confusing a way do they speak. Whereas somebody who may be explaining, complex concepts, they can do in such simple manners. I think Birkan one time mentioned, maybe it was a month ago, if you study, Einstein's theory of special relativity, apparently it's something that's kind of complex, but in the way in which it's explained, it's very short and to the point, that really most people who have any sort of science sort of background could understand.
another points from here about this simplicity, conciseness. I want to go back to Asim's comment. He says, just a reminder, if things were complex, the specialization would be required, and most people are not specialized. So what? The first reading of this paragraph, it sounds like there are people, unlike us, right, who have, most of us has at least a university degree, or trying to get a university degree, or at least thought about a university degree.
That's in this high school.
Yeah. So when we read this paragraph, I don't want to offend, by the way, anyone who doesn't have any university degree. Actually, like I'm planning to say something just the opposite. So when we first read this, like it sounds like an author referring to some people who are not specialized with Asim's term. Even if you try to explain things in their details, they wouldn't understand. Therefore, you have to sacrifice some part and just give the crux of the matter. And if they are, let's say, lucky enough, or if they are clever enough, they can find other sources to study the details. Or there are some people, as the author says, like a simple-minded, and this is the majority of the people Quran addresses. And people like us, again, are special people, so we shouldn't forget, and we should keep this in mind. Like when we read Quran, just keep in mind that it is not for you, but it's for simple-minded people. Go ahead, please, Asma.
Actually, like, I am not really sure here, like, Nursi refers to, when he says simple-minded people, I'm not really sure if he really refers to those who doesn't have any kind of degrees. To me, like, being a simple-minded has nothing to do with your worldly degrees at all. If someone doesn't even take a minute out of his life to really wonder about this, like, ordinary, let's say, ordinary creation, or this, like, existence, no matter how many degrees he can have, like, that is a simple-minded person, because, like, he lives his life in a very superficial way, like, on the surface level. So, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, like, categorize, like, those people, like, based on the, like, secular education they have gone through. I think simple-mindedness, like, more refers to a character that, like, doesn't necessarily, like, think of the let's say, like, in quotation mark, like, the deeper meaning of the thing, or, like, just takes everything on the surface level and moves on with his life. This can be an, like, elementary school level person, or it can be a, like, professor, or, like, with someone with PhD. Like, they both can equally have the same kind of attitude.
So then the question is, at least to me, is like, when you read such verses, where do you think you stand? Like, I'm asking for myself. So Quran tells me somebody puts sun as a lamp. Or Quran tells me, behold, there are rocks from which streams gush forth. So where do I think that I stand in terms of being simple-minded or specialized or whatever. And so how should I approach it? How should I take it? If I take it as, yeah, he's talking about the rocks, the streams gush forth, it's just to get the attention of ordinary people who cannot even think further than rocks. So that's the reason he's talking about the rocks, but I should replace it, or I should substitute rock, as Yusuf was saying, with electrons. Because I'm not simple-minded, so I have to think about some cosmological arguments, or it has to be like I should replace the rocks with some philosophical concepts, and then it will be for me. Otherwise, rocks are not there for me. It's just for simple-minded people. Is that the way I should take? Or should I say like myself that Quran is approaching or addressing simple-minded people or ordinary people? He's not saying simple-minded, but ordinary people. And like, to be honest, I'm reading Quran right now, right? Mm-hmm. So it must be addressing me and speaking to my ordinary side. So there must be something ordinary with me or simple-minded with me when it comes to rocks.
I think like when it comes to understanding the Quran, we are all ordinary people. So it technically really refers to us. Can you like, I cannot say that. Can you say that like you are like really deep in like understanding the different layers like of the meanings of the Quran? I certainly cannot. So like I am the first addressee of it in that sense. So I am one of the ordinary people. But there may be some verses that refers to you in a different way than some others verse as well, that you may have like some deeper understanding of certain verses because you can relate with like certain verses more than the others. So I don't, even in that sense, I am not sure if there's like one set like position or like location. So it's like a dynamic relationship actually.
That's true. So yes, I guess to summarize what I'm saying is when I read such a verse, I should ask myself, do I really know what he's telling? Like, am I really aware that there are some rocks that streams gush forth? Am I really aware of this? One example, I was in a meeting discussion like environment like this, and we were studying some verses. I don't remember exactly. They were about stars and so on, and the Quran was saying, we adorn the sky with stars, and people were saying just what I said like a few seconds ago. They're saying like, yeah, these are good, but these are for ordinary people. We already know that, stars are formed that way and this way, all these technical stuff. So we already know more than the people, at that time. So we should get even more from these verses. And I said myself, I remember, like, what are you talking about? Like, forget about them. I already know about them. Like, I already know how stars are formed and, all these technical details. I heard them a lot, but I never heard before that sky was adorned with the stars for my pleasure. So you see what I mean? Like, in that sense, the technical background didn't help me to see the simple fact that the sky was adorned for me.
I think like that's because like if we are to put in different terms, like this being ordinary or being like really deep into it, it has something to do with the level of like one's like iman in the creator. So being simple, in quotation mark, being simple-minded or being ordinary versus being advanced has nothing to do with the worldly degrees or anything like that, but it has something to do with the being an entry-level, elementary level student of the Quran in terms of like increasing the level of the belief, or you have like made some progress in terms of understanding the world around you with the teaching of the Quran.
Yeah, so ordinary in the sense or with respect to belief.
Yeah.
So if you are trained with Quran and Quran educated you, then you will become a, let's say, advanced student of Quran. So relative to Quran's education, if you have never started that education, then you are an ordinary
You're an ordinary person.
And someone like me, who is not educated or trained with such a worldview, this is what I need. There's a necessity to teach me from very scratch, like from the beginning, from the rocks.
That is the reason why like Quran should or must speak to mankind in a concise and allegorical manner, because otherwise that progress wouldn't be able to achieve. Because like every time when you study the same verse like in a different context, you are expected to increase your level of iman. But if it was a clear-cut like description of a certain event in a very descriptive way, then that wouldn't leave any room for like extracting different meanings out of it.
Asim raising his hand, I guess. Now he lowered. If you say something, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I think I should move to Philadelphia, I think. Okay. No, so, like what Suhail was saying, and, if the one who is speaking to us, like if we understand that, the one who made the universe, and when we look at it, we know that it has been made. Or if you look at ourselves, we know that, I am not being given existence by myself, but there must be a source behind it. Now I'm looking for guidance from this, right? Now, everybody, I would say, who is created has to get that guidance. Nobody should be left alone or to their own selves or, to their own devices where they should not be, where they're not getting the guidance. So each one of us should be among the ones that are being addressed, right? So we are all the addressee of this message that must be coming. We have to verify that. We have to confirm that, who is speaking in this particular verse? What is he trying to communicate, whoever is speaking? And we should not lose ourselves in the details of, like I was saying, the specialization. So one does not have to know, that this is this kind of rock or what kind of, properties the rock has. And, I don't have to be a geologist and, really study all sorts of different earth matters to see what the verse is saying, because that's not the point of what the Quran is saying, right? So it is saying, it is pointing to, pointing to something that is significant to my being in terms of my existence. So that's the point, that all these things that we may lose ourselves in thinking that they are simple matters. Why is our Creator telling me this? They are for a purpose, and they are pointing to something that is very significant to my being, right? So that says, to the simple minds only, this is shown, the tips of the vast truths are shown. So everybody, according to their level, gets some of the truth, a piece of it, according to whatever, but nobody is excluded. Everybody is included. So that's what at least I understood from ordinary and simpleness and conciseness, Why is it so? Because so that nobody is left. Everybody is covered.
Okay, let's continue, inshallah. Let's continue with the next paragraph.
We didn't do the last part of the paragraph.
Go ahead, please, sir.
So, and moreover, that the divine disposals which are wondrous and extraordinary beneath the veil of the commonplace and under the earth are shown briefly. What's it?
Seen in the ordinary event refers to him or points him out.
Yes.
And that's where you have the levels.
Would you like to read this part beginning from the beginning again?
Moreover,
yes.
Moreover, that the divine, so this is the second part. The first part was about being concise. Second part, moreover, that the divine disposals, which are wondrous and extraordinary, beneath the veil of the commonplace and under the earth, are shown briefly, as if they are hidden under the earth or hidden under your eyes.
And hidden by veil of the commonplace. So they are actually wondrous and extraordinary, but they are covered with this perception or idea of commonplace.
Which we call, or the questioner called, natural states of rocks. In the question it said these are natural states of rocks. And this is why he's referring to, they are not natural, they are not ordinary, they're extraordinary.
So in that sense, like, let's say a professor in evolution or a professor in geology can be, based on this, can be the simplest minded person, because he is so much into like the causal relationship, understanding the formation of the rocks in terms of the causal relationship, that puts him in that level that he may not, we shouldn't really speak to, like, refer to the other people, should always speak about ourselves, but for the sake of example, he may not have any sort of understanding of the divine disposal behind the ordinary events.
So when you need someone to use as an example, you can always use Yusuf. You don't have to go outside the circle. Feel free.
Divine disposal mean?
Divine disposal, I guess, like a manifestation of the name. So what is disposed?
It's tasarruf, I guess.
The actions of the creator.
Tasarruf.
Yusuf, would you like to continue and finish? No, just finish the sentence and the paragraph.
Thus, it is due to this mystery that the All-Wise Quran says the following with one verse.
Okay. So, beneath the veil of the commonplace, he says there are these wondrous and extraordinary truths, divine disposals, and Quran trying to reveal them. Right? That's also interesting then. Like he used, so beside, yes, you said one part is being concise, and the second part, I guess, we need to be reminded that what we think as ordinary or commonplace is nothing but the veil. And if somebody wants to tell us that beneath this veil there's something wondrous, somebody should speak of this veil first. Right? But I'm trying to say, the Quran would speak of rocks because the rocks are the veil for us. But they are the obstacles that we should pass through.
So the policy is what, like, taking the events like for granted with a prejudice, or they're just like ordinary stuff. There's nothing special about them. That is where the fallacy is. Like if we have that kind of attitude, that's our question. So like it is actually, that question is with us. Like, so anyone has that kind of approach to the things around, like himself or herself, is kind of bound to ask that question. What's really like, what's so special about it that like it's mentioned in the Quran? And I think that's where the problem starts. Like that we don't take the things as something unique and extraordinary. We just think that, oh, it's just like this is how it happens. Tectonic movements, this and that, like, and this is how things come to be. And it's just everyday thing. It's just normal. But the question is that really so? Or if it is, how that really so?
And this is a general theme of Quran to attract our attention to quote unquote regular ordinary things. Quran is always giving examples from such ordinary things. But contrast it to the Facebook shares that you receive or the newspaper headlines that you see. So it's always something, as you were saying at the very beginning, at the margin. So trying to attract my attention to the things that are abnormal or not like the rest. The Quran is saying, no, pay attention to the very same thing that you have been seeing for the last 30 years of your life. There you will see that I am your creator.
That's really interesting. Even like when it comes to belief matters, when it comes to let's say religious circles as well. This is where we look for the creator, right? We look for miracles. We try to prove that Quran 1500 years ago pointed out a scientific truth that just being discovered.
Well, there was this famous picture of a, what do they say, the honey, but on a stick. With mulch,
Oh, honeycomb?
Honeycomb. Okay, so honeycomb, and on it with Arabic letters was writing Allah.
Oh, okay.
So, and this was being advertised as miracle. I mean, are you blind? Don't you see that this is definitely the creation of the Creator? But as if it was a regular, quote-unquote, regular honeycomb, it wouldn't be a miracle of the Creator. But somehow the bees knew how to write Arabic, and they ended up writing it so that it became miracle. I mean, this is even applicable to like quote-unquote believers, so not necessarily some evil media out there.
I don't know about you, but like I find myself in such situation all the time. Like when I'm short of an argument with someone, like I try to imagine to find a way which somehow includes a miracle to convey or to convince or whatever, right? Is looking for extraordinary, being
convince the person that you're like discussing with?
Just imaginary person, let's say in my mind. Yeah. Being oblivious, is it oblivious to ordinary? Yeah. Being oblivious to commonplace things, how they actually wondrous and extraordinary, is a state that I find myself all the time. Your example, it's very interesting. The Quran only talks about be, nothing more. He says, we ordered be, command be, so that they will make homes in places and so on, right? Is the word. Sorry?
Talks about fly too.
No. When it comes to like a bee, honey making, Quran only says bee. Like it's enough for a miracle. Just the existence of the bee, just the actions of the bee is enough for the miracle. And it's even funny, like the way they produce the honey and the way they organize and so on, it easily defies the complexity of the Arabic language. Yes, I guess there's one comment from Yusuf, who's standing just across me. Oh yeah, he sent a Google image, I guess, for this honeycomb. So he made another Facebook share. Let's continue with the next paragraph, inshallah. Asman, would you like to take us through? No?
Thank you.
Brahma, is the next paragraph? Okay. Thus, it is due to this mystery that the all-wise Quran says the following with the above verse. So, the author gave us some things to keep in mind that, when you read such verses, be aware that it's concise and addressing every people, and it's using a language that everyone can understand. And by doing so, Quran trying to convey us some universal principles, some profound and general truths, principles. And now he approaching the verses with such a method. O children of Israel and sons of Adam. As Yusuf said, I guess the previous verses are about children of Israel and sons of Adam. And taking from my perspective, I am a son of Adam.
But this is also beautiful in here because Nursi is adding this sons of Adam here. Within the context of the verse, it's talking about children of Israel. So if you read it like a historical story, it sounds like as if, oh, those Jews, they were so such and such people. But the way Nursi reads it, it's saying that, no, it's talking about we, son of Adam.
O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what has happened to you that your hearts have become harder and more lifeless than stone? For do you not see that those extremely hard, lifeless, huge rocks formed in vast strata under the earth are so obedient and subjugated before the divine commands, and so soft and tractable under the dominical works that to whatever degree the divine disposals occur, without resistance, in the formation of trees in the air, orderly water channels and veins, like the circulation of blood in veins, occur with the same ease and order and with perfect wisdom in those hard, deaf rocks under the earth. So I guess like all these explanations are just for from which streams gush forth, and when they are cleft, water issues. So this sounds very ordinary. When they are cleft, the water issues. But the Nursi says, like, are you so blind, or your heart is so hardened that you don't even see the miraculousness of this water issuing from cleft rock? You don't see the miraculousness of the fact that the tiny rootlets of plants can crack the rocks and find their water from there? Don't you see that this is nothing but obeying a command? Like this is, don't you see that this is almost impossible without such an order from the divine? So I guess, yes, you can take the verse. I just realized that actually, like from our previous discussion, not previous, like previous in the sense a few minutes ago, our discussions so far, so there's one possibility that one author is saying, or do you know what, you should take these verses as metaphors, allegories, but they're not talking about rocks. They're just there to make some analogy, to comparison. And what you get from there is something beyond rocks, right? You should, it's like, writing a poem. He's talking about the rocks and your heart, how it's hardened. And this is the point it's making. It's just an allegory. But the Nursi says, no, just look at the rocks, like literally rocks. The fact that the water gush forth from rocks is what you should be amazed with. You don't have to go further and make some analogies and try to find the literature value of these verses and so on. Just look at the rocks, like the real rocks. When you walk to home or work tomorrow morning, look at the rocks behind or beneath the trees and the plants and see the miracle there. And this is what Quran is trying to do. And when Quran says like your heart is hardened, it's not just trying to tell you that, oh, wake up, there's a creator, be aware of him. But he's saying that your heart is hardened because you don't see the miracle when you look at the rocks. You think what happens with the rocks is just ordinary, nothing special with them.
And with that verse, Quran is trying to crack the heart that is hardened like rock. So this verse is now becoming the command that is going to crack my heart. Actually, there is this is also the case in the creation. For example, when you look at a sparrow, this is what I feel when I look at sparrows. When I see the animal, the body is very fragile, and just looking at the movements of the sparrow, I feel like the sparrow also has a very fragile soul. But when you look at the lion has a very strong body, but looking at the behavior, you see like the animal also has a very strong soul. I mean, it's not like body of lion has a soul like sparrow, and the body of sparrow has a soul or behavior like a lion. So you observe this act of creator in the creation. He is really giving the things their due. And I guess the same thing applies to the text in here, and by what you just said, Nursi is applying this. So showing this aspect to us. Yes, the very same example has two aspects. One is it is really speaking allegorically, but the second part is the allegory itself is what actually it is. So like the body of the allegory in this case is like the hardness of the stone. It has a meaning part which is like the soul of sparrow, but also it has a body which is like the body of sparrow. So in this part now he is starting to detail us what I am supposed to see in the body of the rock with all those examples.
Body of the verse.
Body of the verse, like the rock itself. But it is going to take me to the meaning, allegorical meaning, like the soul of the verse. So there is a perfect balance of this, or examples of this in the scripture, which is the speech of the one that is creating the creation.
I'm not sure an allegory really refers to your immediate experience anyway. Like when we say mutashabih or allegory, I guess they are the same kind of meaning. Since the main purpose of the Quran to train men's mind and the hearts on the existence of the unseen world, and how do you really like explain someone to like what the unseen, like what the things are in a realm that you have not reached? So using the immediate concrete examples, but those are like, I think that's what you are trying to say, those are being like an sample, allegorical sample that refers to a realm that you can make sense from your own experiences. So like allegory doesn't necessarily refer to the immediate experience, which in this case is rock. It more like refers to like the, let's say, the power or the kudra behind the rock. You know what I mean?
And the part I'm trying to highlight is, yes, like this is the part that we discussed so far. Like these verses, from one aspect, are not really speaking of rocks, but they are referring something else about the unseen. And the thing is, we usually stop there, as if because I know that it's allegory, because I know that there's something beyond that, beyond the rocks. And as if I can reach this beyond the rocks, whatever it is, without the help of rocks, like the real rocks. So I can,
impossible.
I can discard them. Right? I should, reach this unseen, and I should, think about it, or I don't know, satisfied with it, whatever. But what Nursi is saying, you should study rocks, like the real rocks that you can hold. Not as a geologist, but as a student of Quran. Look at the rocks tomorrow. Look at how plants are raised on top of rocks, because the under earth is full of rocks, right? Look at their roots, how they go through rocks. Study them, and then you will understand what these verses telling you.
Just want to refer back to, because I feel like it is important, what Yusuf pointed out, like Beni Israel versus Beni Adam. Even though like when we studied this, like even though we may think that we are not really doing that, but I oftentimes, at least with myself, I see that I place myself in a certain group, then I started like reading the text, like because it is so much like ingrained with us, like or in us, that it became almost like our identity. Like we cannot really define ourselves in any different way. That's why like we always fall into that trap. For example, like if you take the Quran as this like the book, the holy book of Muslims, like there is really no way, absolutely no way, because you just put your like first step wrong, so like everything else will be wrong. So like everything that is being discussed here will by definition inevitably like will be referred to another group of people who are evils, and the verse talks about like their heart has nothing to do with my heart. So like I place myself in a camp, which are the Muslims, and the Quran is the book of the Muslims speaking to me, and in this specific context it doesn't really refer to me, it refers to the Jews, which are like the evils that are going to go to hell anyway, as opposed to like being like Quran being the speech of the Creator, eternal speech of the Creator that speaks to all mankind from the beginning of the time to the end at all levels, and I am just one person out of that mankind. I'm one of the sons of the Adam, and it speaks to me now. So whatever it speaks in terms of like the rocks, hardened heart not being like opened, let's say. So it has everything to do with me. It has nothing to do with the Jews. But again, like oftentimes, like even though we think that we are not doing it, I see it all the time that like in our subconscious, in the back of our mind, we are Muslims and we are somewhat saved already. So that doesn't really directly address me. So that I just want to highlight it and like withdraw the tensions to it.
There was a comment from Mohammed Saeed. he says the rocks are being made in steps. They are passing the processes as bread made from dough, level to becoming a loaf. So he's making an analogy between making bread making, how you may make a bread from dough and how it becomes a loaf. The same way the rocks are also being made in a process. So either all these actions are just happenings by themselves, or either they just happen by themselves or are a momentary disposal. So the story of rocks takes you to a universe that is meaningful, alive, attended every moment. So I guess this is like what I understand from his comment, that if you realize that the rocks has just like human beings, they have a lifespan in which they been transformed from one state to another state, then you will start questioning how every step in this process taking place. So even a story of rocks will become a lively story, full of all these actions. We have 10 minutes. Any other points with this paragraph? I will read the last two sentences of the paragraph. But anything about the miraculousness of the rocks, how they obey commands, follow commands, order.
So maybe after reading the following two sentences.
Let me read and then, yeah. And like the way the branches of trees and plants spread in the air, with ease encountering no obstacles, the delicate veins of roots spread with the same ease in the rocks under the earth. Just like the branches moves in the air, the roots moves in the rock, in the rocks. The Quran indicates this and teaches an extensive truth with the verse, and it will continue with the other part of the verse, I guess.
So this other part of the story is also interesting. Like in the air, trees growing seems again natural and normal. So by showing the other half of it, saying that under the earth the stones are cracking and allowing the water to go through, as simple as it is happening in the outside, now also makes me question, was it really easy in the outside that the plants were growing in the air? So, I mean, once I start questioning the miraculousness of rootlets going through rocks, then I should also turn back and question the apparent ease of branches growing in the air. Because it seems very simple. Or what do I mean by it being simple?
Just to like highlight maybe, so I will repeat what I said with this paragraph. I really like this. Like I haven't realized that before. That author is really talking about rocks, just rocks, like nothing special. Like we talk about conciseness, simplicity of the Quran, and so on. But still, when we were discussing this part, I'm checking myself. I was still, thinking that yes, Quran has a simple language, but beyond that, there are all these treasures and mysteries. As if the rocks are not mysteries or like a treasure. I guess I have this tendency to cut myself from the reality. Like I just cut myself from the reality. I go the word of ideas, the thoughts, all these abstractions. This is, what seems to be attractive. On the opposite side, author Nursi, Imam Nursi, he's trying to keep me connected to the reality. He says, no, don't go there. Like, just stay in the reality. Play with rocks. Look at the trees, the branches, the ease they grow, in ease they grow. So this, I don't know, interesting. There was someone who, I guess, tried to say something.
Can I add something? Yeah, I mean, I share your excitement. This is a very beautiful paragraph. Because, what attracted my attention was this little phrase that says, divine disposals occur without resistance, right? And through the formation of the rocks and the way the paragraph starts is so beautiful. What has happened to you, oh man, that your hearts have become harder and more lifeless than stone? Really, how deep and penetrating this question has. What has happened to you, really? Just tells, as Birkan, you were saying, really start wondering and seeing that this things that everybody may be calling it ordinary, but these are very extraordinary miracles that is happening. And this question is waking us up for that fact. Look at it. And the way the detailed description on how, look at those hard, lifeless rocks, in the matter of divine disposal is so soft and tractable under the Dominical works, right? And then he goes, it's just, although it's rocks, look at that is just a sample for you to look in the universe. Look at the formation of trees. How come they're like spreading like that in the air? That is another miracle that is happening. And then he connects the streams of water that we see, they go through a particular path, right? If you look at a river, it goes through a certain flow. It's so organized and orderly. And then he says, look at inside your human body, look at the circulation of blood in veins. Imagine, it's amazing how, the particle goes from one place to the other with such ease. And who is in charge and making all these things happen? And then again, he talks about, how those so delicate veins of the roots, how they penetrate inside, through the rocks under the earth. I was watching a documentary and they were showing how, they had a camera underneath the earth. They were observing all the roots of plants. And they were saying they know what to do. So a bunch of scientists who were saying that there's consciousness in the roots, and they know where to get the food and nutrients that they need from the soil. And it looks so amazing how they did the time lapsing of how those roots are moving and just spreading throughout the earth. Because we don't really observe with these, we don't get to see exactly what is happening because of our capacity, how we are looking in terms of the eyes. We need a certain time span that we see the changes that are happening, right? So for example, we don't know how from the baby or childhood, now how we grew up, but in the stages of 5 years, 7, 10, 15 years, we get to see that change. Same thing in the whole creation. Everything is just in continuous motion. And then, for example, with the technology that we have now, we can see that all that motion, that there is some changes that are happening. But I really like, first of all, the waking up part in terms of questioning, what has happened to you? Just observe the earth, look at it, and see what, how things are coming into their existence, how this whole universe is moving, and see that, just this particular verse can bring so much, awareness into your being, that really one has nothing to but be amazed at the miraculousness of things. Yeah, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.